Hello again. Welcome to a new week. I'm actually here in North Carolina right now, which is why you don't see me in the fancy host home that I've been in that I've kind of been using as my office for these different interviews and stuff, and the shed and all that. I have come down from Pennsylvania to North Carolina. This has been one of the things, honestly, that I've been a little bit worried about with this podcast, is that I do travel quite a bit. And on one hand, that's a positive because it means that I'm going to be able to go and do interviews with people all around the world eventually as this develops and grows. But it also makes it a little bit more challenging because it means that whenever I do things like these introductions that I do, for example, I'm sitting on the floor on the carpet in my brother-in-law's house here in North Carolina as we're here visiting. And it also is going to be a challenge whenever I have to go set up. I have other interviews that are coming up soon, and I have to bring all this gear with me, but I'm just so thankful that I get to do these interviews. And so that's what's going on here. Thank the Lord I was able to get this interview with Ben and Carissa in before I came here to North Carolina. So you're going to notice in this interview that I am back at the office where I do my interviews usually on Zoom. I was able to record that right before I drove down here to North Carolina. And then the same with the following interview that's coming up in a couple of days. I was able to record that just before. So I was able to get that done, and so it's just a matter of doing these introductions. So it's just me trying to figure out new things as this podcast develops. You guys are all on this journey with me. I'm learning how to do all of this. And so I appreciate all of you who've been sharing and just being gracious as the quality of these podcasts have grown. And I'm just learning how to do all of this and get the best quality and the best to be an encouragement to you and to just bless you. And as this whole thing grows, and it has been amazing to me how this has been growing every single week. More and more people are listening. More and more people are subscribing, whether it's through the podcast on Apple Podcasts or whether it's on YouTube or however it is that people are watching. We seem to be getting more and more subscribers every day. So it's really exciting. And so I want to thank you all. Ben and Carissa Krey, the ones that I'm interviewing today, I feel like I say this with every single one of my podcasts, but it was one of those happy divine appointments, or yeah, it's a divine appointment, right? That's what they call it. It was one of those happy moments where I actually met Carissa years ago. I was in Argentina for about 6 months with my wife, and my wife was down in Mendoza, Argentina, doing what's called a School of Frontier Missions with YWAM. I had already done mine in Scotland quite a bit before, and so I was down there. I was sort of helping on the school, taking care of Elias, my oldest son. My youngest one had not been born yet, while my wife did the training there. And Carissa, she was single at the time. She was down there and actually babysat Elias at one point, and maybe more than once. It's so long ago, I honestly don't remember how often she babysat him. But we became Facebook friends after that, and kind of it was one of those things where I started noticing she was popping up on my Facebook, and her husband Ben, they were out. Honestly, actually. So my wife actually told me, hey, you should contact Carissa's husband, Ben, and see if he'll do an interview because he's a Christian DJ. And I thought, well, that's really cool. I want to hear about what it's like being a Christian DJ and all that. And then as I went and I looked more into what Ben and Carissa have been up to, I found out that they've actually been traveling with Sean Feucht, and they've been doing ministry in the streets and part of this Let Us Worship movement and all of these different things that have been going on. And so I saw that, I was like, wow, I really need to get a hold of them and see if they'd be willing to do an interview. And so I reached out to them, and they were busy traveling around, preaching the gospel, going on the streets, just setting the world on fire for Jesus and worshiping all over. And so they were busy, but they were able to squeeze in a time, and they were so gracious to give me this opportunity to just sit down and talk to them. And just to hear how God has been using them, not only with just Ben being a DJ, but also their story and with this whole Let Us Worship movement. And so it was such a blessing. And I know that you guys are going to be really blessed and encouraged by this testimony. So I just want to invite you to sit back, or if you're driving or whatever it is that you're doing, just to let your ears perk up a little bit and listen to this testimony, because what God is doing right now and all of the turmoil that's going on right now, God is really moving. And Ben and Carissa are right in the thick of it, and they are doing awesome things for God. And I hope this encourages you to get set on fire and to be part of what God is doing as well here in the States, but also all around the world. So I know it's going to be awesome. I know it's going to be a huge blessing for you. So enjoy Ben and Carissa Krey, and blessings to you all. You not coffee drinkers?
We are. We're just out of coffee, man. So, yeah.
See, my wife, she's Panamanian, so she, of course, loves coffee. But I've actually never been a coffee drinker. I think it's gross.
Yeah.
Unless it has like my wife, every day I do drink coffee with her in the afternoon. It's like the thing we do to wind down in the afternoon. We drink a cup of coffee, but it has to be decaf, because since I don't ever drink coffee, if I drink anything with a lot of caffeine in it, I can't sleep the whole night. My heart is just, I get so like fired up over it. And so, plus it's bitter.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to meet you, Carissa. I've known you for a while. We haven't talked in a long time, but
I know. I was thinking about it. I was like, it was probably 10 years ago.
Yeah. Exactly. I was thinking about this because I'm pretty sure that you babysat my son, Elias, when he was like 2 years old.
Yeah.
And he's 13 now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So crazy.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I've been seeing all your posts for you both have, because you have your personal Facebook page and then you have the Bennyk music page. You guys are doing so much right now. I was sitting there thinking about it this morning. I was praying about it, and because I have notes and things and questions, and I was like, man, this is going to be one of the trickier interviews I've done, because both of you individually are involved in so many things that it's going to be interesting just asking you these questions. So
hey, no problem, man.
I'm really excited to get into it.
We're excited.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, Carissa, like you said, it's been at least a decade. I met you in Mendoza, Argentina. We were both in YWAM there. But Ben, I don't know your story. Can you just tell me kind of I want to hear yours as well, Carissa, but Ben, can you just tell me your background, how you grew up? Were you raised in the church?
Yeah. No. So, pretty fun. So I have one sibling, a little sister, that's us, and family kind of grew up northern Minnesota, 20 minutes north of Minneapolis. And faith was, we're kind of like seasonal Christians, basically Christmas and maybe Easter, if we're that lucky. So raised very traditional, kind of like Catholic kind of roots, and God always felt very distant from me. Kind of got involved in drugs at a really young age, 13 years old. I got high for my first time, so It was kind of terrible. So I'm a very like experiential person, so I want to like experience something. And so I got involved in that at a really young age. Kind of fast forward, got like confirmed, and I asked the Lord, I was like, hey, whoever you are, Buddha, whatever, make yourself real to me. And, shortly after, it's just kind of in my heart, just wanted to know the Lord, but just didn't know how to come to him. And this crazy rave DJ, my buddy's older brother, presented the gospel in a very real, like relational way. Told me his story about getting delivered off of ecstasy from like the 90s, like crazy deliverance story. So for me, really kind of captivated my heart. Accepted Christ when I was 16. Got filled with the Spirit shortly after, and it was pretty awesome. I led my little sister to Christ, and then my parents kind of came in shortly after. They thought I like joined a cult at first. So like, what's going on? He keeps talking about this Holy Spirit meetings and singing in his room. What's going on? So the Lord got a hold of myself, and then my sister, then my parents. So kind of opposite typically on a lot of family structures. So it was good, man.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a kind of short how I came into the Lord by a crazy rave DJ. So
Yeah, I'm so curious about that because you're the first Christian DJ that I've met who also uses it as ministry. Were you always into music, or how did you become a DJ in the first place?
yeah, no, it's a good question. The gentleman led me to the Lord. His name is Dustin, and it was really vital. And obviously my faith journey as well as DJing too. So kind of both collided right when I was a teenager. So fell in love with this like EDM dance music that he was playing. And I was like, man, this is like the coolest music ever. It's literally right when I came to Christ, and started consuming the music, got involved in youth ministry, and really through Dustin, he's the one who inspired me to like pursue DJing. So it was really right on the same time I came to the Lord that I really started consuming music. And then in Bible school, I went to a Bible school in Tampa Bay, Florida, Rodney Howard-Browne's Bible school. Pretty fun, revival hub. And through that experience, I bought 2 turntables and a microphone and started to learn how to match beats by ear in Bible school and throw parties through all my Bible school friends in Tampa. So,
yeah, I saw that. I was just, whenever I was doing the research, just looking through your Facebook pages, if I saw that you were at the River Bible Institute. And I have another friend who he's on staff with Rodney Howard-Browne as well.
oh
And
wow,
it's kind of funny because Rodney Howard-Browne, he isn't as out in public as he used to be.
yeah,
And yet as I do these interviews, I find more and more people who he has discipled. He has like this army of disciples out there that are just reaching so many people. And yet I had never heard of him. This was a long time ago, but I had never heard of him before. And I went to a conference in Denmark whenever I was a missionary in Turkey, and our whole team went to Denmark. And he was actually, honestly, we were going to see a missionary named David Hogan. And,
oh yeah, David Hogan's amazing.
yeah, absolutely. I love David. And we were going to see David Hogan there. And someone said, hey, Rodney Howard-Browne is going to be at this conference. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to go with the team. I didn't know who this guy was. And we went there, and I'll never forget it because back then I didn't really believe in the Holy Spirit moving. I didn't know what he ever taught me. Even when I was in YWAM, they didn't ever, in my base, which was there in Minneapolis where I did my DTS, they didn't really teach us much on it. And so whenever I got to this meeting with Rodney Howard-Browne, I never forget, he stood up in the middle. He walked out into the center aisle, and he just yelled. He has this really deep, booming voice, and he just yelled, "In the name of Jesus." And when he did that, everybody started laughing. I had never seen that in my entire life. And I remember sitting there just thinking, what in the world is happening right now?
Yeah.
Thankfully, I had been in Turkey for probably a year at that point. So I had been exposed to a lot of supernatural things, but I didn't know about laughter. I didn't know about a lot of things. And so I remember, it's funny because part of the reason I do these podcasts is because I have always been very irritating to people in conferences because I'm so curious about the way people think in people's lives that every major speaker who has an impact on me, I usually follow them out to their car and ask them questions and say, well, how did that happen? Can you tell me? And I remember following him out. I followed him out he went out the side door, and I followed him out the side door, and I was like, what just happened, man? And he looked at me and says, you're just going to have to go seek God for yourself, and he'll reveal to you what was going on. And I was actually mad about that because I thought, well, how do I do that? I don't know how you did. And so it was really funny. But anyway, yeah. So Carissa, can you also, because I know you from Argentina, but I don't know anything about how you grew up either.
Yeah, so I grew up in the church. I remember going to church as a little kid. My siblings and I all served in church by the time we were 10, 11, 12 years old. And so it was definitely something that we did. We went to church. And so I kind of made a personal decision to follow Jesus when I was 8. And missions soon followed after that. I heard about a missionary in Madagascar, and I ended up going home and telling my parents I was going to be a missionary to Madagascar.
Wow.
And I was only 8 or 9 years old, and it's kind of been with me ever since. And so, yeah, I went on my first mission trip when I was 12 to inner city LA, and just haven't really stopped living on mission for Jesus.
Is that a dog? Or
Yeah, that's our pup.
I thought
Come
it
here,
was.
Bristol.
I thought it was an
He's
airplane
excited.
at first.
I swear it's not us. We won't growl.
Say hello.
Hi.
Yeah, the
Oh
furry
man.
friends.
How long have you had him?
We've had her just over a year, but she's
wow.
7 years old.
Yeah, we've been my kids have been wanting a dog for so long. We've been here in Pennsylvania. Yeah. We came here and we've been kind of homeless. We've been in host homes for the past year now, just waiting for God to open up a house for us here.
Wow.
And so I just remember that whenever
I
heard the dog.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So did you ever get to go to Madagascar?
So I have not been there yet.
No. Then how did you end up in Argentina?
When I was in my first mission trip in LA, I actually worked in a Latino community called Hawaiian Gardens. It's like 99% Hispanics who live there. And that is where really the Lord put like the Latin American culture and Latin people on my heart. And so I started learning Spanish when I was in high school, and just really fell in love with Latin America. And when I was searching for a place to go with YWAM, Argentina came up. And so I ended up in Mendoza.
Wow. That's how long were you there in Mendoza? Because that was a wild
3 years.
place. 3?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you two meet?
So we met after I was in Argentina. I came to Minnesota because my older sister had just moved here. And I had every intention of visiting my sister and then going back to Argentina. But the Lord had other plans. And I found myself in central Minnesota, like small town where you go hunting and snowmobiling. And I thought I was going to be there for 5 months. And now I've been in Minnesota 9 years.
Wow.
So through that journey of being here, I went back to school at a missions college just south of Minneapolis, and ended up at a church of a dear friend of mine, what happened to be the same church that Ben was at. And so we met at church, and then we also met on Facebook through mutual friends. So it's a fun story.
It's pretty cool. She was a coffee girl. I was as a very progressive kind of church. They had DJs in the foyer. The senior pastor, kind of very similar story to me, got saved by in a club. So anyways, he had like DJs in the foyer. So I was DJing, and then she was the coffee.
So wait, hold on. There is a church that they have DJs in the foyer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. I need to go to this church.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Pretty great.
It was great. It was fun. We were there for a season, and it was fun. But we met there. It was pretty amazing.
I served him coffee.
So yeah, she kept the DJ caffeinated, and the rest is history. I say it was love at the first bass drop. So
Wow.
So
that's awesome. And how long have you been married now?
4 years.
4 years now.
4 years.
Yeah.
And you've had some pretty crazy adventures. I have so many questions. I'm not even sure where to start right now. Okay. All right. So I'm kind of putting the puzzle pieces together now. So now that I know you were with Rodney Howard Brown, you were doing DJing there, and then you were at a church. That's wild how God took you on that path where you in all these places, you got saved because a DJ, he brought you to that's amazing to me. That is amazing how God puts those pieces together, because clearly he has a call on your life and he's given you this gift, which I didn't even know there was this whole world of Christian DJs out there.
Yeah, it's a 13-year journey. It's been really beautiful. There's this army of like wild spirit-filled DJs globally. So I've just been in this underground Christian DJ world for about 13 years now. So it's been cool.
And you started your ministry, right? It's called Bennyk Music, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so how does one go into ministry as a DJ? I know that you do. I obviously you've been with Sean Feucht for the past. You were with him for at least a week. It was
Yeah.
And so obviously it was utilized there. But outside of these big events, what does a day-to-day ministry look like for you?
Yeah, for me it's been really fun For me, the Lord's been opening up doors even since I started. Been really connected in local church. Just have a huge heart for local church. So that's kind of been just my heart is like, how can I like serve and equip youth ministries, local churches with positive, kind of high energy, fun music that's like Christ centered. So it's kind of been like my thing, kind of day to day, going after like bookings, launching a lot of things for the future radio show, and then a youth ministry like curriculum, which would be fun to like mentor and equip kids how to DJ. So that'll be fun. So just through COVID, it's been a lot of diving deeper into like program and figuring out how best to serve people, with the whole, large events that have kind of ceased for us for short term here. So things are on the up, are slowly on the rise, especially with Sean. It was really encouraging to be on tour again and see thousands gather is pretty great.
Yeah, I want to get into that. I'm kind of saving it. I want to get through the
Yeah.
foundation. I want to get into all of that. I'm so curious though. How do you go after bookings because I just know for myself, I run a missionary organization myself, and it's brutally difficult just to even talk to a pastor, because for me, I usually can't even get past the secretaries of the church because it's a lot harder than people think it is. So how you have such a unique ministry, how do you even get those bookings?
Yeah, for me too, I've worked for a lot of other ministries, and me kind of having my base here has been really like helpful and just faithful to the call of like what I've been doing for the last like 13 years. So I used to be the church relations director for Pulse Ministries. Nick Hall is kind of the evangelist, and we kind of filled the stadium here locally. About 80,000 people came out for one night. It was like a 2-year campaign.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool. And then I used to work for Youth Specialties. It's like a kind of parachurch ministry. We did like 5,000 seater youth pastor gatherings. So through that, honestly, I've kind of built a large base of just like referrals and just awareness of who I am, which is cool. Honestly, it's been a lot of word of mouth, to be honest, like to God be the glory. It's been a lot of just referrals. You do a great job at an event and you make connections, and then the Lord kind of takes care of the rest. So yeah, booking is definitely no joke, and it's hard work, but for me, it's just been fun to really just build out like that relational piece and like build out like solid relationships. As you know, like ministry is so like relationally driven, so yeah, it's been a long journey to get here. So yeah, definitely has not been.
We have, I 100% understand that. We have, I just know for this podcast in particular, there are a lot of younger ministers, people who are kind of growing in ministry, that I like to ask these questions because I get asked quite often as well, especially because we do mission schools and things like that. And so there are these new ministers who are coming up, and one of the questions is always, how do you go from zero to having a full-blown ministry? And what you said is right on. It's really all about relationship, and it's about being faithful and being a person of excellence and doing what you do well. Yes. And then that word of mouth is really, really, really solid way that God will open. A lot of everyone wants that one explosive thing, like Randy Clark, for example. I don't know if you know much of it, but he was a pastor for so long, and then he got invited to one event and the Holy Spirit started moving and everything exploded. That's what most people want to happen, but a lot of people forget that you have all that time beforehand of just being faithful, and then God moves. So Carissa, I know that you're the executive administrator for a ministry, but that ministry is pretty new for the Unity Revival movement. So what were you doing before the Unity Revival movement?
So I am still working full-time as an office manager for a financial advising company. And just due to the ministry evolving and coming out of nowhere, I've become the executive admin for Unity Revival. And we're still in a transition place where, because it's so new, I'm only working for them part-time. But as we get more funding and things like that, they want to transition to me being there full-time. So I still have a full-time job as well as working for Unity Revival Movement.
Yeah, that's a lot of the people that I've interviewed. That's how it is for a lot right now. You, as you're building ministry, as you're growing, a lot of times tent making is just part of it. I know for my wife and I, even though we've been in this for so long, we've been married 14 years. Yeah, because my son's third. I always base it on how old my son is.
Yeah.
We've been married
Nice.
we've been married 14 years now. And, just over those times you have the highs and the lows, and even in finances. And there have been a lot of times we've had one of our big income things was we have a jewelry store on eBay.
Nice.
And so it's just, you just do what you got to do. But
Yeah.
I saw your post saying that you are trying to transition full time. So can you tell me about this ministry? Tell me about I've read a lot about it, but I want our listeners and our viewers to hear about it as well.
For sure. So Unity Revival Movement was founded by Charles and Lindsay Karuku, who have become dear friends of ours in the last 5 months. We found ourselves on the streets of Minneapolis after George Floyd died there on 38th in Chicago. And we were just out there ministering. Ben was DJing for a group of friends that had come in from out of town. And we stumbled upon Charles and Lindsay just preaching with a bullhorn. And I was like, wow, that's cool. They're Christians. Who are these people? And then we met later that night, and with a group of us kind of decided, well, let's do this thing. Let's start being the hands and feet of Jesus on the streets of Minneapolis, bringing hope in the midst of heartache and breakthrough in the midst of bitterness, just riots to revival. Let's do this. And so that's kind of, back in early June is when it started. And we were down in South Minneapolis for more than 50 nights in a row, just preaching the gospel, loving on people, hearing people's stories, distributing food, water, things just to the community. There's, grocery stores and gas stations that were completely closed down. And so we were just kind of a life source to the people there who needed something more than the rioting, the looting, and all of that. So that's how it started. And now it's interesting now that we've been working with Sean Feucht, because he actually came to Minneapolis on June 13th. And he had an event somewhere else, and then it got canceled. So he's like, well, I'm still in Minneapolis. I've heard about what you guys are doing. Can I come lead worship? And so he did, on the street corner there with a few local band members. And, from that is kind of how Sean started this riots to revival, and started using that phrase was something that we had kind of come up with Charles and Lindsay of just seeing God move. And so it's been really cool. Just one small connection, one decision to allow Sean to come in and lead worship with us started this national traveling and movement with him, leading worship and inspiring people to find hope in the circumstances of 2020.
Yeah, because that movement, I was watching it from whenever it first started getting noticed. I've been watching it a lot on Sean's Instagram and just his public Facebook page and everything. And it really has I think the right word is snowballed in a good way.
Yeah.
Into just this gigantic movement. I watched his post yesterday. He did that video where he was saying, I might get the numbers wrong, but I believe there were supposed to be about 50 stadium events, but now they were all canceled because of COVID. And there's only the one that's going to be in Washington, D.C., which is the one that they were just approved for. Which, are you two going to be at that?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're excited.
You must be excited. That's going to be a really crazy event.
Yeah.
So sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine.
So tell me about, what has it been like being on the street when these things were happening? Because whenever you see the videos, obviously everyone is worshiping the Lord and dancing, but every now and then a little kind of tidbit comes out from even Sean saying, "Oh, we were just fined. We were given a sanction or something." I can't remember. Citation. Sanction is not the right word. Citation, given a citation, or I even saw one where he posted about. They were threatening to arrest you guys was that in Chicago?
Chicago, yeah.
In Chicago. So obviously there's more going on than what we see in the little video clips. So can you tell me what is that like being there in person?
Yeah. I would say for me, I didn't know how sometimes hard it is just even in our day to do an outdoor worship event, like how much opposition. just regarding like from local government and just like this political upheaval. So it's been really interesting to see like the status of where we're at currently in our nation and like how there's all the restrictions through COVID. So for us, I think each city is different and unique. I think Chicago was the most like hard opposition we felt on the Midwest tour, just due to them not letting us utilize a sound system. Basically any power for a sound system would have been confiscated by the cops. So yeah, very unique and different. I've never experienced that in my whole 13 years of DJing. So what was cool though, God's provision, we actually had one of the like lead lieutenants of the police department, chief deputy. She had a bullhorn that she let us utilize for to worship on and to speak. So it's pretty unique and interesting. You know, kind of the things we've turned a lot of these cities into like a worship protest, you can say, is like your way around a permit, because basically they won't award you a permit due to, I don't know, just
it's due to COVID. So basically no one in any state or any public venue is the cities aren't releasing permits because of COVID, and so you can't even get one if you tried. So if you say it's a protest, people can gather, and then the police are there to protect you instead of shut you down.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask, because I don't pay a lot of attention to politics or things like that. But that is one thing I notice is I hear about you guys getting citations and fines, but there are these massive protests going on where there doesn't seem to be any kind of backlash against that. So I don't quite understand how that even works.
Yeah.
So when we received a citation in Cleveland, I don't even know what it was for. I guess maybe the sound, and that we didn't have a permit, but we couldn't get a permit. So that was it's a weird thing where they're like, well, you don't have a permit. Well, even if we tried, we couldn't get one. So they gave us a citation, but we set up, we were there, we were gracious. And by the end, they were allowing more things to happen than they originally said. So
whenever when you say they gave us a citation, what does that mean? Is it they're going around handing out citations to everybody, or do they just give it to Sean?
One citation as a group of us. And so they were going to give it to either Sean or Charles, who are kind of the leaders of what's going on. But right at the time that they were dealing with the cops and the park police, there was a gentleman, I don't even know who he was. Not many people know who he was. His name was Ryan. He stepped in and said, put my name down. I'll take the citation. I'll go to court.
Wow.
And so we don't even know who he was. He wasn't a pastor that we were working with. He was just someone who happened to be there at that moment and said, I'll take the blame, put it on me. And so that was the one citation was for the group collectively.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I want to talk to this Ryan guy now.
I know. Right. I'm like, who is he?
Some people think maybe like a lawyer or something background. So hopefully that'd be nice. Idea.
But he was very confident in going to court and taking a citation for us.
Wow. Well, if anyone listening to this, if you know Ryan, let us know. I want to talk to him.
Ryan from Cleveland.
Yeah, Ryan, we love you.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, but there have been more than one citation, right? Or has there only been that one?
On the Midwest tour, the 6 cities that we went to, it's only that one.
Okay.
Chicago, they didn't give us a citation, but they did threaten to confiscate our gear, and there was talk of arresting people at the beginning when we first arrived. But then after talking with the cops, I was very confused at first, are these cops not okay with us? This is weird. But after talking to them, they were super nice. The majority of them were very nice to us. One cop even thanked me and was like, thanks for being here. This is not the type of people we normally deal with. So this is a break for us. When you're in South Side Chicago, it's not typical for a bunch of mostly white people to come and just worship.
Yeah.
For me, it just spoke volumes too of a Black cop, like provide like a woman of peace, to provide like the bullhorn.
Yeah.
I just meant, especially like with Unity Revival, like our hearts like for racial reconciliation, and like to see like that. Only the Lord could have orchestrated that. It was so powerful.
Yeah.
So it was really cool to see that in Chicago.
Yeah. And we found out too that the orders of what the police were receiving was coming from the mayor of Chicago. So everything, they were just like, our hands are tied. There's really nothing we can do. And so that's why I think part of that, the chief deputy, she was so kind in letting us use her bullhorn, was like, well, it's not technically sound equipment, but it's what I've got and what I can do and still obey the mayor, I guess.
Wow. I saw that picture.
Yeah.
I might actually might have to post that just so people can see it. Yeah, that's an awesome picture. And so when you go to these places, because I did an interview, this was a couple weeks ago now, with a pastor down in Texas, and he refused to close down his doors during COVID. He's also one of those guys who is, again, influenced by Rodney Howard Brown. And
I might know. What's his name? Do you know?
John Wallace.
Okay.
Yeah. So John Wallace, Pastor John Wallace, he's a young guy. He's in his 20s, and I'm telling you, his story is, I've never met anyone with so much favor on their life. His story is incredible. But I interviewed him, and he talked about how it was, oh man, even whenever I was interviewing Pastor John, I couldn't remember the guy's name, but there's a very famous preacher who came out of Rodney. He's like Rodney Howard Brown's right-hand man or something like that. He's one of the big name preachers. He has a name that's really hard for me to remember. But he contacted John and asked if he could come do an event down there in Texas. And so John, they agreed to set up. They were just going to go out and do this event preaching the gospel. And so Pastor John, he actually went to the local mayor, the government officials, and including a judge. And he went and he just told them, he said, listen, we're doing this event no matter what. And I'm just coming in to let you know as a courtesy that this is going to happen. And he was actually very surprised to find out that they were actually very supportive of it. They said, well, we know that the main governor guy says no, but we're with you. Just go ahead and do it.
Wow.
So have you experienced that at all, or has it mostly been just resistance? Or obviously you have people like this, the chief deputy, who are supportive of you, but have there been a lot of officials who've been supportive?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I mean, it's this weird tension of like, I don't think people are necessarily against us. They're obviously, the mayor of Chicago was definitely against us, but even I think in Milwaukee, we had 2 sheriffs pull up, and they were like, hey, we're going to shut you down. And we're like, oh, this is a worship protest. And they're like, oh, well, if it's a protest, then I guess we're here to protect you.
Wow.
And so it's just this like almost word game that just changes their mind, and they're really friendly people. And I think a lot of like our team has just been able to minister to cops and city officials and different people, just loving on them, because it's like, we're not against the police. We're not trying to do any of that, which is so like loud in our culture right now, of defunding the police, of not being in favor of the police. And so for us to be like, no, we appreciate you, we value you, and to come in alongside them and be like, yeah, if you're here to protect us, that's awesome. Can we pray for you? Can we bless you? Can we buy you food? Different things like that to show honor to them, because we're not there to like be against the government or be against, their protection and their service to the community. And so it's definitely an interesting, every city we go to has been a little bit different, but I mean, like we said, Chicago was definitely the most resistance. But even then, like the chief deputy, and there was a city official there. I don't know what her title is, but she works in the community. Everybody knew her as Mama Wade, and another Black woman who it's really cool just to see like these Black women in places of authority in the community. And so she spoke out. She was definitely a Christian. She got up there and just like prayed and prophesied over Chicago, and it was very cool.
It's powerful.
So Yeah, it's just this weird thing that we don't really know, like, why people are against what we're doing, other than that we're people of faith.
Honestly, it comes
That's
up
been
for,
the theme of it.
for me personally. It's like, the Lord is truly moving. It's an organic, beautiful revival that's has emerged, and it's the opposition to the gospel. Like it's the cross that people are upset about. So it's like, hey, you're doing a good thing when there's opposition.
Yeah. Do you have other counter protesters, people who come aside from officials? Have you had any other just normal people come and cause any issues?
Yes.
Very few though.
Yeah. Well, in Minneapolis, like, we went
yeah.
close to 50 days for revival services in the streets of Minneapolis. And there was always kind of like a give and take of opposition. It's crazy. There's a gal that was really opposed to us, but it's been fun. Like her heart is for justice and like to fill that void with Christ. Like it's been a really fun kind of journey. One of the times during like an altar call, she's like literally shouting us down, and yeah, it's crazy, calling Carissa like names, in front of the whole block of Minneapolis. So it's we've definitely felt the
felt the most opposition in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
yeah, people telling us that that's not a place for Christians to be. People don't need the gospel right now. They need to grieve.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, all right. But then we have other people that like in Minneapolis as well that are like, thank you for being here. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for what you're doing. So it's just this very weird hodgepodge of people in Minneapolis that are for us and some are against us. But in Chicago, there was actually a guy who came by himself to kind of counter protest us. And he ended up getting saved and getting baptized.
Powerful.
Isn't that amazing how God will do that?
It's just so cool.
We just went and did street ministry just a few days ago over the weekend. We went to Harrisburg, which is here in Pennsylvania. It's a really, really rough area. Where we were doing ministry, there were people dealing heroin 10 feet away from us, just openly dealing heroin, and prostitutes and all this kind of stuff. But it was so crazy because while we were there was a woman who, her name was Cinnamon, which I don't think was actually her name, but her name was Cinnamon, and she was there talking to us. And she was obviously a lady of the night, and she was there just hanging out. And I was talking to this one man from Puerto Rico named Jorge, and I was talking to him. And a few minutes later, I had this conversation with him. He was really open. It was really cool. But then Jorge walks away, and a few minutes later, another man comes up and pulls out a knife to stab Jorge while we're there doing ministry, handing out food and clothing. And Cinnamon, she yells out, "Hey, stop that! There are church people here." And whenever she said that, the guy just put his knife away and just walked away. And it was a wild.
Praise the Lord for Cinnamon.
I was like, man, Cinnamon's kind of cool.
Yeah.
That's so wild.
How God will draw people.
Amazing.
He will take us into these really dark locations, and then he'll draw people who have lots of issues, but it's to expose them to light. Right. It's absolutely wonderful. How do you feel? Whenever COVID started and everything started shutting down, there were all of these people who were prophesying that, okay, this is actually a time for revival. This was clearly this was God speaking out to the church through multiple prophets. And then it's birthed out of this moment that you two have been part of the spearhead of. How do you feel being literally the people that God was prophesying about at this moment, for this time, for this revival?
Wow.
It's been really, really humbling, honestly, to say the least. For us, it's just been a humble yes. Originally, we had plans to go to Brazil, do a mass crusade in Brazil. I went last year, DJing in front of like 10,000 people. It was beautiful. And I was going to take my wife and then go to Paris, and then COVID just shut everything down. And for us, just to encourage people that like whatever's in front of you, just to say yes. Like we're just humble people, and we just want to be obedient to what the Lord and the Spirit is drawing us into. And it's just been a humble yes to say our city's in flames. Minneapolis was literally burning. Antifa was in the house. Like, it was crazy. And our heart was convicted to be a part. If we can go to the nations, we can go in our own backyard. And it was just been fun from that humble yes to see what God has been doing with that after, and being able to minister together. It's been really encouraging and refreshing for me too. And yeah, I just say to encourage people to just say yes to what God is calling you into, and enjoy the journey.
Yeah. I mean, what seemed like, a few days of riots in Minneapolis, and we're just going there to kind of, I don't know, patch up people's emotions and bring some sort of peace. It has really turned into something so much bigger. And so it's wild when you say yes to the Lord, and when you just put yourself in his place, in his timing. Like, he allows things to move more than we can imagine, and it's like, I remember, partway through being down in Minneapolis every night, and I was working a full-time job. So it's like, I'd go to work 9 to 5 and then go to the streets of Minneapolis afterward. And my boss at one point, who's also a believer, he said, you're really a missionary when you minister in your own city, and he's like, that's really admirable, because most people are like, oh, I want to go on a mission trip, or I want to be a missionary, but they're not willing to do the hard thing of even having a full-time job and sacrificing any free time that they might have in the evenings to go love on people. And so that was just really encouraging, even to my own heart, of like, yeah, missions has always been a huge part of my life. And it's just cool to see in this season, even amidst COVID and everything else happening, that the Lord would use us in our own country and in our own city.
Wow. Where does this go from here? Are you going back out, or because I noticed Sean also on his Facebook yesterday, it seems like he's taking kind of a break right now. Is that what's happening as sort of a team? You're all taking a break, or are you going back out, or are you home now?
Yeah. So we're home now, but we, as Unity Revival Movement, we have plans to do city transformation in Minneapolis. And so we have blueprints of what this would look like to bring long-term transformation to Minneapolis. But then we also, because it's growing nationally, Charles and I will probably be traveling more once Sean starts doing the meetings again early October.
Wow. So I was reading about Unity Revival, and it's, as you said, it started whenever George Floyd died.
Yeah.
And so no, one of the top, what would you call it, ministry points or ministry areas is racial unity. Mm-hmm. So clearly there is a division throughout the United States in racial injustice and the issues that are going on. But I'm actually curious, do you believe that there is racial inequality in the church as well?
Yes. Mm-hmm. I'd say one of the biggest things I've heard, like a statement which is shocking and sad, is that like Sunday morning is the most racially divided, day of the week, and it's like, even in our churches, it's so segmented with race. So like for our hearts, it's been fun to kind of bridge the gap and be a part of race, to bring like diversity into our churches. Cause it's like, even in our churches, it's one of the most divided in church world.
Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think that it's hard. Like, I don't know if I fully understand the meaning of the word inequality, because I feel like that puts a like derogatory sense towards Black people. And I don't think that that's in the church, where it's like these white people oppressing Black people. I think there's a division. I think that there's Black churches and white churches, and sometimes Black and white people come to the same church. And so we've seen that even in our own city, where it's like there's urban churches, there's urban white churches, there's urban Black churches, there's suburban Black churches and suburban white churches. And we're realizing more and more the importance of bridging those gaps, of bridging those churches, and that we can all work together. We are the body of Christ. And if it doesn't start with us, then who will it start with? If the church can't even come together and be like, hey, you're an urban Black church and we're a suburban white church, let's do something together. Let's bring our strengths together and do something for our community. If we can't link arms, then I don't think any other part of society or of the US will come together in that way. I mean, it has to be led by the church because we have Jesus, which ultimately brings that unity, you know, that peace, that like
unifying factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that it's been interesting to me because I've seen a lot of, because we're all on Facebook, right? We all see,
Yeah.
we all have lots of friends, and you see the huge broad spectrum of the things that people post on there. And I one thing I noticed is so many believers have taken the stance, and these are people in the church who have taken the stance of, I didn't do anything wrong, so why should I apologize for something that somebody else has done? And yet I find, I was talking to a friend of mine about this recently, because a lot of that stems from people just not knowing church history, just not knowing how race has affected the church in the United States. Because a lot of people don't know this, that in the church in the early 1900s, whenever there was still segregation, when everything, there was all this stuff that was still going on. A lot of people don't know that a lot of this division with white and black churches is because the white church, what they taught for hundreds of years, even from Europe, and then it came over to the States, was that black people had darker skin because of Cain. Because whenever Cain killed Abel, God said he was going to put a mark on him as a curse, and that they said that God turned his skin black, and that was a sign of the curse, that they were descendants of Cain. And they taught that in the church in the early 1900s, up until, well, actually, there's still some churches that teach it. They're not very known, but up until the mid 1900s, that was a common teaching, was that black people had dark skin because they were descendants of Cain, and then they were again descendants of, was it Ham who Noah cursed? One of the sons of Noah.
Yeah.
They were also descendants of Ham, who was cursed by Noah. And so there was this whole teaching that black people were actually less because they were people who were under a curse, and white people were not. And that's why there was that division that was so huge in the United States, which is why I love what you guys are doing in this ministry of bringing that unity, because I feel like this younger generation is probably the first that hasn't really grown up under the heavy influence of the racism that was from the 50s and 60s and 70s. And so there's this opportunity, which I would love to see. Do you guys remember The Call, whenever Lou Engle, he would go out and he'd do these huge. So I went to a call event whenever I was a teenager, and Lou Engle came up, and I remember it was so powerful, because back then there wasn't so much talk of race between white and black people, but it was about the Native Americans. And so what they were doing in The Call is they were going to different cities, and they were bringing Native American leaders up on stage, and then they would wash their feet, and then they would pray for them as an event. And I thought, man, wouldn't that be amazing to do with leaders in the black community during some of these big events, to bring them up, wash their feet, pray for them, just like they used to do in The Call back in the day. I think those are needed because of, not just for reconciliation, but also because of the amount of believers who are taking that defensive stance rather than a stance of humility. Yeah. How do you respond to people whenever they say things like that?
I think it's interesting because of like, I would say personally for myself, I've never considered myself a racist. I don't think I've ever had anything against black people. I mean, I have two sisters that are adopted from Africa. They're very black. But I think that there are certain things in our society that feed us lies, you know, of, I remember even after this whole racial tension exploded in the US back in June and end of May, I was at a gas station, and there was a young black girl there that was very disheveled. And I almost got this like, oh, is my car locked? And it was just like, man, is that racist? Or is that just because they don't look like the best upstanding citizen, you know? And it's like, I want to check my heart constantly, even if it was a white person. Am I that judgmental? Maybe they just had a bad day, maybe, you know? And so it's like, I think it's hard because people see what we do in racial reconciliation, and what we've done in Minneapolis is invite people into conversations of like, I apologize on behalf of the white generations before me and what they've done to the Black or minority generations before you, and so it's not this sense of white guilt. I think that that's like that tricky fine line of apologizing on behalf of other people, but not getting to this place of guilt of like, oh, I'm so sorry that I'm a white person. Nobody should be ashamed or apologize for the color of their skin, but having a sense of humility of saying, I know the history of the United States, and I know that there were white people, and there are still white people that are extremely racist and that have caused division and hate and destruction to the minority communities of our country. And so it's taking that stance of saying, you know what, I in my own self maybe haven't done anything that's racist, but I apologize to you for feeling the way you feel, or for the past generations that have gone before us. And now I'm here today to say that you're a beautiful creation of God, and I love you and I accept you, and I want to walk through life loving my brothers and sisters of other nationalities, of other races. And so it's just a tricky thing. And I think for white people to understand that, like, we shouldn't be ashamed for being white. Like this whole white guilt thing is a lot overboard. But we should take a posture of humility and say, yes, there are a lot of things in our social systems that have created division. And so we need to humble ourselves and say, we will be the change, even if we never did anything that was blatantly racist.
What does diversity in the church look like to you? Because you mentioned before, okay, there are these white urban churches, Black urban churches, let's do something together. But I imagine you have a vision that's beyond that as well. So what does that look like to you?
I would say like one is like collaboration, and also to draw getting these folks to work together more in a regular basis. Like we saw a huge breakthrough in Minneapolis. We did a prayer gathering and a prayer march in our city, really historic in unity. Black, white, Indian churches kind of coming together and praying for the Twin Cities, for businesses to be rebuilt. And it's really fun. It's a spark and a start to some really fun growth for our city. So I would say for me, the solution is to see more churches work together for unifying efforts through rebuilding cities. Also to just building out for pastors to try to be intentional to build out a multi-ethnic congregations. Obviously every church has its strengths and weaknesses, but like globally and locally to try to get pastors to see through that lens of the value of diversity is huge.
Sorry, you go ahead, Carissa.
Okay. I think that even when we did this prayer march through Minneapolis and through the George Floyd memorial site and everything, we stopped at the memorial, and there was actually a document that these pastors signed saying, I will be a part of the change. And they were Black pastors, Hispanic pastors, Native American pastors, white pastors, Asian pastors, I think, even just all coming together and signing this document saying, I, Pastor so-and-so, will commit to be part of the change in bringing racial reconciliation and unity to our city. And so that was just a powerful act. And sure, it goes beyond signing a piece of paper and doing a one-time, yes, I hereby say that I will do this.
It's a step though.
But it was a huge step, I think, for these even pastors to get outside their four walls and be like, wow, these are pastors that I've never done anything with, and they're in my city, and they have the same heart and vision to bring unity and to be a part of change in our communities. And so even yesterday, there was a pastors gathering of over 150 pastors from all different, groups, suburban, urban, Black, white, Hispanic, just kind of those same group of people, just bringing in more people. Okay, how do we do this? How do we bring unity? How do we bring city transformation? How do we do this together? And so I think there's a lot of momentum right now, especially within the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, of pastors really seeing like, how do we work together? How do we bring long-term transformation? And so I don't know what that looks like, specifically of unity in the church, but it just starts with conversations of continually meeting. Okay, what's a project we can work on together? What's something we can do? And to show our communities that we are working together, that it's not just the Black church over here and the white church over here, the urban or the suburban, but we're all doing it together. And even the pastor's gathering was held at a, I would say more urban.
Yeah, urban church.
Predominantly Black church. And so to not hold it at your suburban white church, but to have it at a bigger Black church is just even a sign of like, hey, we're not just the white churches or the suburban churches with a lot of money wanting to host something. It's the urban churches wanting to host something. It's the Black pastors inviting the other pastors in.
Our dog agrees.
Whining. So I think it takes a lot of prayer and intentionality to really go after these things, because it's not easy. Hundreds and hundreds of years we've seen just the church do their thing the way they do it. And it's easy to build a church, grow a church with people who look like you. Yeah. It's super easy for people to be like, oh, those people look like me. Those people act like me. Those people believe like me. I'm going to join that church, and so it's different when you have, I think we've learned so much just about Black culture in the last 4 months.
Yes.
And Black Christian culture and Black church culture and just different things where you're like, I did not realize like how different they are. How like, it's not just the color of skin. It's like culture that's like deeply ingrained in people. And so it's like, as Christians, how do we bring that unity? How do we go back to the foundations of white Christians and Black Christians? And how do we like rebuild a foundation that brings unity to everyone and saying, we are the body of Christ, no matter what our cultural background is. So yeah, it's just been really interesting.
Yeah, that's the thing for me. I have a very multi-ethnic family, if you want to call it however you want to call it. My wife is Latina. I have a little sister who's also adopted sister who's Black, and then I have a brother who's a brother-in-law who's Korean, and so we have all the different skin tones and cultures. And I think I feel like a big issue with this bringing people together is the lack of understanding of culture. What you said is so key, because a lot of people, for some reason, well, just because of just history and everything, they boil it down to skin color. But really, I think a lot of it comes down to churches don't know how to interact with other cultures. Yeah. And the fact that we have this cancel culture happening right now, which I think is awful, because what happens is they're trying to make through it. What happens is, with no freedom of speech, and you can't point out anything about somebody else's culture, all of a sudden you're a racist if you point out this culture enjoys this. For example, my wife, she's Panamanian. She loves rice and beans. It doesn't make me a racist to say Latinas like rice and beans, because my wife literally just made a pot of beans to take to it doesn't mean it's a race thing. But there's this concept that if anything of another culture is highlighted, all of a sudden you're a racist for highlighting it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a huge mistake, because we should be celebrating cultural differences and bringing in those cultural differences into our church. One of the things that we've done with our church here, which is this small country church we go to here in Pennsylvania, is that when they have potlucks and my wife will bring a Panamanian dish. And that's wonderful. We need more of that in these churches.
Yeah.
So it's just more of an observation than a question. I just feel like our churches, if we're going to have more unity among races, that you have to take culture into consideration.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's just, as a missionary myself, for a long time, one of the biggest mistakes missionaries made, and still in many areas continue to make, is going to a tribal group, and the first thing they do whenever they get someone saved is they make these people who've been naked for generations wear a suit and a tie and learn to play the piano and sing songs in English. And that's a very easy way to lose a whole group of people.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a tribe that we work with in Colombia, which it's so frustrating because I'm not allowed to name them, because they asked me, because of persecution stuff, they asked us not to talk about them. Yeah. But there is a tribe that we work with, and we're the only missionaries that work with this tribe. And the first time I went to them, they told us that the other missionaries around, they said, you're going to fail. People have been trying to go to them for 40 years and nobody's ever successfully reached them. So we went in, and don't get me wrong, it has been a very challenging road for me. So I'm not saying this is a giant success story, but what I am saying is we were able to go in and spend a week in their village, spend a week with them. And that was one of the first things they said to us was they said, the same thing. People have been coming to us for 40 years and we never accepted any of them because the first thing they did was come in and said, well, we can't wear our traditional clothing anymore. In that culture, all of the men have long hair, and they would always come in and with the verse of, oh, it's a dishonor for a man to have long hair. You need to cut your hair, which for them, it's this symbol of wisdom, and there's all this significance behind it. And so I feel like it's something that really is lacking in our churches today. Yeah. I have just one other question. We'll see what happens, but we're about to wrap up here. But I going back to the DJ thing, I have a quote because I wanted to ask you in the beginning, and then we started talking about all of this stuff. Wanted to ask you. So obviously, whenever you're DJing, right, you're doing it for the Lord. You're doing it for you're worshiping the Holy Spirit, worshiping God, and everything that you do. Now what's that kind of music called? DJ? I don't know.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, if I could spin anything, I love like DJing, like worship remixes. So like getting people to worship God in a whole other way, So a lot of it's called electronic dance music, or EDM is kind of like the buzzword. So like Skrillex, all like the kind of secular guys, they're like EDM guys, So it's like, for me, it's been my mission for a long time, is just to reimagine that music to be Christ-centered and glorifying the Lord, So it's been fun doing a lot of mixes. For that, finding just amazing tracks and starting the fun road of production. And it's been cool to bring like a whole nother generation into the church, kids that could care less about Christ, but they love this music, this EDM music. It's the sound of the nations. You go to Europe, you'll see these huge festivals, upwards of 100,000 people in attendance, Tomorrowland, and these big kind of festivals. So it's been fun to kind of redeem this like genre for Christ, and to get people to worship the Lord in a whole nother way. It's high energy, they're jumping, they're shouting, having a good time, and they're encountering Christ and his presence in a whole nother way.
Yeah, that is something that I love about this. And even from the videos I've seen of what you guys are doing with this, the Revival Unity movement, is people, whenever people think of worship, they don't usually think of EDM music. And that's generally not what they think of, which is what I love, because you are breaking through new ground. And when these videos of these events you guys were doing with Sean, people were dancing and jumping around, doing backflips and all these kinds of, which people generally do not associate with worship. Right. And I think it's so important. Again, it comes back to culture. It's so important for us to go back into culture and realize you can worship God anyway.
Yes.
You create music, right? You write your own music and such.
Yeah, I'm starting to. I've had a couple releases. I have some other projects over the years, but it's been fun to get people to worship God in another way and break those grounds. Like back in the day, like electric guitars used to be like of the devil, you know? And it's been fun to kind of like bring my turntables, my DJ controller into like worship settings and the faith environments, and say, hey, it's okay. And it's okay to bring this in and to like reimagine what worship could be like. So it's been cool.
I love that. Martin Luther, when the Reformation was starting, he used to complain. He was quoted as complaining many times to his friends. He said, "It isn't fair that the devil has the best music." And so he would go into the bars of the day, and he would take their bar songs, and then he would take of course it was like the Lady Gaga of the day, whatever the song that everybody was singing, right? He would go and take the most popular songs and then change the lyrics and make them Christian. And then it's funny because today, I love how music evolves, because today those old school hymns, those are considered the most sacred, the holy, but they were all bar songs. They were all taken from bar songs and they just put Christian. Yeah. So I tell people, I even said that on one of my recent podcasts. I said, just so you know, for those of you who idolize these hymns, you're just singing the Lady Gaga of back in the Reformation days.
That's funny.
I love it. I love what you guys are doing. And really, it's been a blessing to see all of just what you're doing on Facebook with the pictures and the videos you show with you guys are doing with Sean, and spearheading this movement. And it's just really awesome. And Carissa, with your push-ups, I hope you're able to get those. What is it, 50,
Yeah.
right? Do the, what is it, 50 push-ups by the end of the year?
Yep.
Yeah.
She's getting there.
You'll get there.
Did 20 yesterday.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I know you're busy. You have an event like tonight, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
North Central.
Yeah. You guys are out just serving the Lord, worshiping, and just many blessings to you. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate
it.
the opportunity, man. So fun.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank
All right.
you.
See you guys.
We'll see you.